Whee! All right, once again, back at it. C3 time. Chill, chat, create. And, you know, the C3 computer. But, anyways, working on the quote-unquote mystery mech, because I haven't posted, I'm lagging a little bit behind on posting some updates to see if people will guess, but if you happen to stumble across, feel free to guess. Went ahead, put the legs onto the hip area. They'll eventually get glued to be sturdier, but as you can see, we'll take a classic Battle Master. Quite the difference in size just with the bottom half. So there's that. Doing the mud, more fun. I have to do the mud in this one section that before I put it together. Gonna come back in. I do have better sanding film coming that isn't worn out, but I'm gonna make use of what I got for now, provided I can find where I just had it. Otherwise, yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Where did I put that? I found really coarse sandpaper. Don't need that. That wouldn't work out well. Oh, there it is. I found it. This is getting rather worn out. Gotta figure out how to use this camera too. So there's that. Now, yes, if you're watching this after the fact of going live, welcome. You can always comment. I believe comments are allowed, regardless. So, hey, win-win. Alrighty. Might you do a bit of a palette cleanser in the form of this Astartes here and there once we get some more mud, because the mud's looking pretty good. I may also cut some things a bit off camera, as well as carefully work on getting this thing ready to go. This sits on the mech's body, this antenna piece. It's sitting there. Might put a little mud on that just to be safe, but do it carefully. It's a little bit fragile of a part. Gonna kind of just leave it as is. Very light, fixing up its base so it sits in well. I do have the body. It's in two pieces, and I'll show half of it. Had some issues in the print, some blow-throughs, but that's fixed with the mud. And you can use pretty good straight up Bondo glazing spot putty with very minimal acetone. Remember, you want to use acetone. Let me see if I can get it better on camera. You want to use this stuff when you are mixing it with this stuff, and you want to do it carefully. It's not exactly, I'm not gonna say it's toxic like OMG, go to the emergency room, nothing like that, but it is not meant to be breathed in very much at all. So you definitely want some type of mask if you're really gonna go crazy with it, especially if you're gonna airbrush with that stuff. And you're gonna want to make it pretty thin if you're gonna airbrush it. I don't airbrush it on account of I only have one airbrush. It's in the garage, and I don't want to mess it up. so there's that. But you know, you can airbrush this stuff when you mix it up into a mud-like consistency. However, to clean stuff, like your paintbrush, your old paintbrush you're going to use, don't use a new one. you can use 99% isopropyl alcohol. And you can probably use 70% or whatever you can find. This 99% stuff is not for topical use. It's not meant to be used like typical isopropyl alcohol. This isopropyl alcohol, rubbing alcohol is for technical use. This is like for printing and whatnot. Not like 3D printing, like print shops and stuff like that. I think. That type of stuff. I don't know though, because I don't own a print shop. Alright. So, we'll go ahead and utilize the table to my advantage because it's flat. And we'll just clean this up just a wee bit carefully. Filament printing sands pretty easily to get like stray pieces off. That's going to happen. That's not like not adhering. That's just stray from like doing the outline stuff and whatnot. Unnecessary stuff. So work on that. And that should slot in. Obviously not going to slot it in with the glue, just to leave that slots. Yeah, that slots in around there. And that's good, it is slotting in. Alright. This is the same brush I used last time. I just cleaned up the bristles with that 99% isopropyl alcohol before starting again. Got all the chunks out. Feels pretty soft, pretty good, ready to mess up again, which is why you don't want to use your best brushes. Something that's going to not necessarily be missed should you gunk it up too bad or the bristles get too splayed. Because this is rather hard on your bristles. I'm assuming. Based on the fact that, well, it's Bondo Spot Putty made liquid. Hard to do this on camera. Trying to figure out a better camera setup. It's the same angle, but I think this makes it a little bit easier to work on. Just gotta get used to where it's at now. And we'll see if anybody shows up. Like I said, this isn't necessarily meant to be purely just this. I might do some palette cleansing, as I call it, with my Primera Space Marine that I also have as a WIP to sound all fancy and cool. Because that's what you do, right? You just got to sound cool, or you're not even trying, or something like that. So there is that to consider. I did sand some of these. I did that last stream, and for just a painting stream like this, a C3 if you will, which I'm going to end up calling it for chill, chat and create. And more or less, I did a little bit of sanding off camera as well, just enough to get a feel for things. So it's not going to be as intensive of application, except for around up here where this piece was not mudded yet because it wasn't on. But I decided to just go ahead and commit to having it all on, and therefore it's going to get mudded up now. This top piece here doesn't need any mud. That's going to be covered completely. So I'm going to give it a little better gluing seal, if you will. Or at least not gunk it up with some mud to potentially interfere with the fit. One thing I've noticed with these parts is that they have pretty tight tolerances. It's not absolutely essential to get it perfect, but I figure if everything looks kind of this ruddy color, as I'm off camera again, if everything looks this kind of ruddy color, then that'll be good enough, as it will have a bit smoother capability than if it was without it. Don't have to get it perfectly glass smooth. Just want it smooth enough that when you start actually putting some paint down with your pigments and whatnot, it doesn't look like it has the filament lines. As long as it looks smooth, even if it feels a little unsmooth, as long as it looks it to the eye, that's all that matters. And yes, it can look it and still feel a little bit unsmooth, but nothing crazy. Well, you just looking to not have you drawn to anything oddly in terms of not being smooth. So if it was like really heavily striated where the paint is going to look like it's got layer lines because, well, the part does, that's what we're looking to avoid. It's meant to be, you know, looked at, not have your finger running across all the parts to confirm smoothness. We're not doing any type of tactile competition. So as long as it looks the part, we're going to be happy. But we, I mean me. So so there's that. And we can add more mud to the actual body parts, which I guess technically that's all body parts. But so this is, I'm not going to do it because I can't print clear very nicely. But this has a setup to run a wire and a battery pack and a little LED setup to make this lit in terms of the cockpit lit and do some lights if you really wanted it. So, where am I? There I am. So there's that. I'm not worried about it. But what you do see around that are these little slots. I have some of them cleaned up. I have to clean up the rest. And of course now I can't find the ones I cleaned up. I know where they're at. It's just all I can actually come across are the one. There's one. So the way this print file works is these slide in to here. These little guys. Oop. Where am I? There I are. They slide in to the, or slide into these slots, and then that slides into the other half. Where am I? And then that helps them stick together with glue and whatnot. And also makes them lock in because the print's precise, so that'll help keep from being glued off center, so it'll be lined up nicely. The thing is, I'm still gonna have a seam down here, but in addition to, well, I'm screaming into this microphone. I forgot it's right on my face. I moved it and got it to stand still. My bad. Between this and a couple other pieces I have to work on still with the printer, and also I think I printed and have to find and work on, is when I want to put the body together, put those in, and then clean up the seam in the center. I don't want to make the seam too in the way by trying to clean it up. So, things to consider. Potentially overthinking it, but that's okay. You know, sometimes you need a little overthinking, I guess. That's what they say, right? So, yippers. A little bit of this going on. I'm not too worried about this seam here, which is kind of hard to see where the gun is, because that's an Omnipod slot, more or less. So it doesn't need to be seamless. This is a modular mech, after all, being an Omnipod, or an Omni-mech. So having that Omnipod slot being a little defined just works. I'm okay with it. Plus, it's going to be tight to the body, more or less, so you're not really going to be paying attention to it. Theoretically. So there's that. We got some little bit on light. You can see it better in person. layers going on here. So I'm going to go ahead and try and take care of those with another layer of mud. Now I'm not painting per se yet, but when we eventually get there, any type of detail work I will probably take out of frame to look up close and, you know, work on before putting it back in frame, because, well, hey, I'm trying to make it look nice, and that's what I do, I suppose, is I take things out of frame. You can, the nice thing is when you do the sanding, I don't know if you've been noticing it or not, you can see it's a little bit brighter because you see more of that filament shining through from the sanding, and you're getting it off the high spots more or less. So when it comes to repainting over that surface, it's really easy to tell because it darkens it all again. So you know where you got, I call it painting, but you know where you got the mud all over that surface, which is very nice. Just makes it easier. We are looking to get this as smooth as possible. So, doing my best here. Little extra in there. And this arm would be good to let it dry, cure. I don't know what you call it at this stage. Harden? I don't know, because it's not pure Bondo and it's not paint. We'll just go with dry until anybody decides to correct me, if anybody shows up or watches this later. I'm getting a bit too much of a stickler for myself in terms of putting it places. I want to kind of keep in mind again what's going to glue to what's going to connect. And then you don't have to worry about doing absolutely every square inch of the mech parts. And again, if you're happy with how your print came out, maybe you can print a lot better than I can. More likely you could if you are into 3D printing, because I'm a novice. Maybe you have it being pretty smooth from the get-go and you're just good to paint. This is completely optional. So there's that. What? Oh, okay. I see. Alrighty. Just making sure everything's good on the old computer. Moving on to this other arm. It is kind of crazy how simply something like this can really help in terms of just things feeling just that much smoother. Again, it's not like it's peaks and valleys here. We're talking very, very minor stuff, but I feel like at the very least it helps out the paint. It could be purely in my head, right? Psychological or whatever, but hey, whatever makes you feel better in this hobby, it makes you feel like you're getting a better result. Even if it doesn't actually do anything, it's doing something for you, right? So I'm all for it. Bar to be. Where was, oh yeah, right here. There it is. You do, I will say, one thing I have noticed is going over the same spot while still kind of curing, drying, setting, whatever, will sometimes reflow it a little bit. So you want to let it get good and dry before going back over it again, if you're not going to sand first. Otherwise, you're not getting what you're looking for. You're just going to get it smoothed out or thinned down again. Thought I heard a weird noise. Must have been the wind. Anyways, let's see what we got. All right, let's do one side. Start getting it mudded up. Like in here in this socket, that's where things are going to connect. I'm going to leave it pretty bare. Because you're not going to see it, I'm not really going to paint it. And that's a connecting point, and I don't want to get things in the way. And if I do want to glue it, I want to be able to glue right to the plastic, not have to fight a whole bunch of layers of stuff. Every so often I like to mix up the mud. It gets a little out of suspension. I'd rather make more mud than have too much made, if that makes any sense, and then have it all settle and have to mix it like every 5 seconds. You can see the thinness here. This might be a little thin, but that's fine. We can just paint successive layers of this mud on. And what you have is the same result, all right? Obviously, we're not using the spot putty the way it's truly intended, which is more or less, you know, glob it on, spread it, sand it down, because we're not doing body work on a car or anything like that. We are doing a scale model. It's just a big one because it's not 6mm. Now, one thing you could also do, it really gunks up the brush, but if you're going to do a long mud session, you can squirt out a little bit right onto the paper plate, and then, you know, use this mud pre-mixed to kind of further thin down the little piece, and then that'll give you a bit more thicker consistency that you can kind of manually thin down a bit, especially if you have a more of a aggressive area to work out, you know, in terms of smoothing and whatnot. Not really something that I feel is super applicable to most situations here, but definitely something to consider, especially if you're going to do prop work. It's kind of the go-between between making the mud and then using it straight out of the bottle, or whatever you want to call that, the package. So I am going to leave the inside, like I said, but I'm going to get everywhere else just because I don't really know what's going to be visible once we put the thing fully together. So getting right up to the socket, I think, is going to be most beneficial for just making sure we have everything set properly in terms of smooth and then putting paint on. This is technically built, or the file is technically put together, from what I can gather, to not need glue on any of the major components, like in terms of the limbs, I should say, so they can move and be posed. while it is cool and it does have some sturdiness, one of the things about posability like that is that it will kind of lose the tight tolerance of posing over time as it kind of wears itself in, and will not really be able to hold a pose per se indefinitely. And so, as cool as that is, I find it's sometimes better to get a pose that you're going to be happy with and then lock it in with a little bit of glue just to support the joints so it doesn't have to just rely on friction to hold itself up. But that's again just me. Maybe people are better at this. I'm sure they are. So they don't have to do that. But I didn't pick these the files that I picked because of posability. It just seems to be what's built into these things naturally. Not just this one, but a lot of the ones I saw. So cool, but not really what I'm personally looking for. So when needed, or if I'm not really too worried about it, I'll just lock in the pose more or less and be done with it, not have to worry about it, and I'll have it look great and be sturdier for longer, hopefully. This is when you're applying the mud like this on these somewhat smoother sections, and you can kind of feel like I can feel up here it's pretty smooth. You won't really see much when you apply it. It almost, if you ever put paint to a model that either you don't have primer on the model or the paint is just not adhering well or it's too thin and it's kind of like you're putting a wash over a color and you're just streaking it on. That's what this mud's gonna feel like on particularly smooth parts. So what I like to do in that case is over attack it apparently. Let it fully dry, maybe get it to where it's a consistent mud color, and then do a quick gentle sanding down, just make sure it's nice and smooth, that the mud isn't making a weird irregular feel, and then you're done. That's you kind of get a feel for it just by how it feels on the brush and on your hands. And I don't have that capability with a camera to show you that part, so I guess you have to take my word for it. But suffice to say, it's always nice when you have that happen. That means there's very little work required in that section. And I'm here for that, personally. So we take that. Kind of hard to tell also on camera, but when you're doing this, like, for what it's doing, it's still surprisingly thin. So I'm not too worried about gunking up detail by just slapping it down into a spot like on these vents here. It doesn't really gunk up any detail, which is cool. Because, you know, we're not looking to do that. We're looking to do not that, as a matter of fact, and we're just looking to get it smooth. So this is a Sunday, bit of streaming, and it's been a bit of a hectic weekend. Trying to determine how hectic I want next weekend to be with doing adulting stuff, such as, you know, maintenance and what have you. I think I have enough. Well, I know I have enough mileage that I could go past next weekend and just do the typical basic stuff of cleaning and lawn and whatnot, and not have to worry about my vehicle or anything like that. Especially after this weekend where I didn't have to do anything except, be up and around and everything yesterday to get, gonna have to come back to that when that's dry. Had to get a new AC system put in, which wasn't exactly cheap or desired, but necessary. So it sucked, but also with it being really hot around here, the lawn that I basically renovated, it's not a machine, is not liking it, and I think I let it get away from me a little bit, so something's up with it, and it's stressed out and not looking too good like it used to. I couldn't really play with it too much because of the AC issue, and then it was far too hot to really do anything. Random life stuff. Kind of a loss of a weekend a little bit, but those happen. As I'm off camera, getting far too into the mud. I'm gonna have to scrape this thing down a little bit just to get some strays out of the way. So I'll let that dry better. And see how this one's looking. So you can use an old X-Acto blade or a new one. I just don't like messing a new one up to scrape some of this stuff. Or I have scrapers too. I'm not looking to scrape it to get it like smooth. I'm just looking to get any stray hairs, as I call it. So I gotta do it off camera so I can see it better. Just looking to get stray hairs off, as I call them. And once you do that, then the mudding will just be easier and not be as messy to clean up afterwards. But it's not in the detail. It's just there. So it's not like I'm worried about carving up detail. And this would probably be something that you're not going to be super noticing anyway. And once paint's on and everything, you won't see. But again, a lot of this is also mental. So if it makes you feel better to clean something up or base something down or whatever the case is, by all means, it's your model or whatever the case is, do it, right? So this is applying pretty well. Just getting some good old-fashioned mud down. So if you do stumble across this, let me know. Sound off in the comments or what have you about your Battletechness in this case, since we're working on a mech here. You read the novels, you just play the video games, or you just more the miniature gaming or collector side of things. What is your state of fandom, if you will? For me, I just really enjoy the setting as a whole, all aspects of it. It's been a long while since I've done any sort of actual gaming in BattleTech in terms of miniatures, so I don't remember much at all, to be honest. And that comes from moving around a bunch, and then kind of just being caught up in, you know, doing the adult life of work and stuff like that. You blink and all of a sudden a significant time passes. Like, oh yeah, right. And then you just keep on keeping on. But I have novels. I haven't bought any of the new novels. I have the newest source book I have is Ilkhan Eyes Only. But I got a bunch of technical readouts, some older novels that I've had growing up as a kid. The video games, clearly. I wish I could get some of the older ones to run on modern machines just for variety's sake and to revisit. I have to dig out of one of my boxes that I have yet to unpack, even though I've been here for over a year. I have an optical drive that's external, and I've never actually tested it to see if I could run an older game better by using it. You know what I mean? And seeing what happens that way. But it'd be nice to get things running. All right. Mud is adhering well. It's always a good sign. All right. Let's queue up some more stuffs, as they say. Where am I? Where are I? Where would that have gone? Alright, let's try that out. I do have a paint pot for water. You don't want to use water with this stuff to clean a brush. Like I said, you want to use isopropyl alcohol to clean the brush, or even acetone if you have a container that'll hold it. I like to use the acetone just in this glass container with the Bondo spot putty stuff. So, otherwise, you can use whatever. If you have something to hold the isopropyl alcohol to clean up brushes, doing this step, you don't want to use water. It's not going to do anything for you. And it's in a very clear water pot. So if you do have a cup for a beverage, right, you don't want to have them be close to each other or close in design to each other, because paint pot water does not taste good. You definitely don't want to drink it. I also like to keep the drink, especially dealing with this stuff, further away than you might for doing this acrylic stuff. I mean, you shouldn't have them run on top of each other anyway, but I just like to take an extra precaution because if it wasn't for bad luck, have no luck. All right. Mix up some more and get after it. Oop, we don't want to get too much in there. Actually, no, that's fine. That's not where the cockpit will go. So we can get in there a little bit more. Good old prep work. But yeah, as I was saying, I enjoy all aspects of the setting of BattleTech. I remember doing the virtual pods as as a kid growing up. Love to be able to get my hands on one of those things. For no reason, and then just kind of resto mod it if we were going to use Car Talk and like put a modder machine in there and set everything up and use that as like a hardcore rig or something. Or, just have it set up right so you could play over internet with people in those pods with the proper setup and everything. That would be cool too. Do I have the space or the funds for something like that? No. No, I do not. So there's that. I have a bunch of the cards. Basically, growing up as a kid with allowance money, birthday stuff, and past that, part-time job or whatever. For a long time, if I was able to get my hands on something that was BattleTech related, I purchased it, like in person. Never got one of the ArmorCast Big Mechs. I'd like to, but unfortunately with them, like some of the bigger, like some of the older books, people just want far too much money for them nowadays. It's like, I get it, they're no longer in print, they're old, somewhat desirable, but to the right crowd, right? A book doesn't need to be $100, especially when it's not even, like, I wouldn't say not usable anymore, but been moved past beyond. Especially Catalyst Game Labs, and even before they started doing it, I shouldn't say before them, because they've been doing it for a bit, but for a while they've been pretty on point with their PDF products. So like, you can get, like, I have the older Comstar book. I forget which edition it is. It's the one with all the mechs, sitting around outside on like a lawn, and whatever else. But you can get that as a PDF, I believe, from Catalyst Game Labs web store for not much money at all. I'd like to have physical copies of stuff. I basically have tried to collect BattleTech stuff still. So if I can find something for a decent deal, I'll get it, even if it's old. Because I like collecting that stuff. But not $100. I mean, come on now. I mean, for the actual models, like the big Timberwolf and the Atlas, that price point I can understand a bit more, but even that gets a bit much. Oh, falling down. Just because something's old doesn't suddenly make it, completely worth something. It's one of those things that people think, oh, it's rare or it's old and it's not money of it, so it's rare. It must be worth a lot. Or it's just old and there's not much of it, right? I'm not saying in this case, I'm just saying in general. Ramblings of a madman. Wish I still had my game boxes. I don't. For like MechWarrior 2 stuff and MechWarrior 3. All the ones that had a physical copy that I had. So MechWarrior 4, all that stuff. I don't have those boxes anymore. Between moving around a bunch and, growing up, and especially when I was a kid with MechWarrior 2 and things like that, things being condensed down and spring cleaning in the house and whatnot, The things that you throw out or that get thrown out only to be something you wish you still had. Yep, getting it all up in there. I do find this little grill section interesting considering the style of power plant that mechs use, you know, a fusion engine and whatnot. You don't really need big, massive like intake grills that seem to be on both sides of this, on both sides of the torso here. Looks cool, but you know, I wonder what else that's for. I don't care. It looks cool. So, rule of cool means you do it, and that's how that works. So, rule of cool is in full effect for mechs, obviously. Not just for BattleTech, any mech setting, right? Let's be real. Definitely not the best use of technology to make a machine for military use. Not making like an android size, you know, person size android thing or cyborg or something like that. I could see that, especially be like, oh well, you know, for traversing and doing certain exploration or whatever, and can utilize all the same stuff we can and things of that nature. But like a bipedal war machine like this is a little... Suspension of disbelief is needed no matter which setting it is, let's be real. But it's cool though. That's why we dig giant robots, because it's cool. I feel like a lot of the battle mechs are more believable than like other mecha stuff anyway. They're not designed super crazily. They feel suitably bulky. They feel like they have suitable or more, you know, convincing, realistic kind of flaws, or yeah, it exists but it can't go that fast, or it's this heavy, or although the weight I feel is something that is a bit misconstrued in the setting, but in any setting, not just BattleTech, but it just feels more believable for me than some of the other settings out there with their stuff. Where it's like, I don't know that I believe that something can, you know, do pirouettes and whatever else out there. Be an acrobatic fiend and still be a robot and also take hits. You know, there's that concept of, well, it's gotta, you need something there to take hits, and that's gonna take up space and mass and all that jazz. But rule of cool, it's the same thing for giant monsters. If you're in the kaijus and stuff like that, they shouldn't really work, but it's cool. Deep sea gigantism only really works in the deep sea, right? So, or I guess in space with space whales, because it's space. It's like the deep sea, only completely different, and therefore it works. So this streakiness, if I go this other way, it should fill in better. Sometimes you gotta feel the grain, and then, you know, paint in both sections with that grain just to get it to adhere better. Which usually means it's gonna be pretty smooth when you're done anyway, and you go to sand it down. So that's always good. I like a good, easy smoothing. I'm not going to get too carried away with the back here because there are a couple things that do need to be glued on there. And not that I'm worried about clogging up the space of the glue tube, because I can easily just sand that down carefully if I needed to. But rather, I don't know what's going to be covered, and therefore was just a waste, you know what I mean? So I'll just go ahead and do more of this and drip stuff places and make a mess. And keep on keeping on. I guess I should re-emphasize or properly state that if you're going to try to do something like this with the Bondo Spot Putty and acetone, make sure the container doesn't get melted by the acetone. Some plastics can hold it, like that acetone bottle is some type of plastic, but not everything can. And you won't know right away. There'll be a delayed reaction. All of a sudden, it just starts leaking out. So if you're unsure, put on top of a paper, not plastic, on top of a paper plate. In case it leaks out, you can contain the mess. Or make sure you have a glass container. This was a mustard container. It was a Belgian ale mustard. It was good mustard. So I was like, might as well use it. What was that noise? What is this? Hello? I swear this ISP, I think it might be going out again. It makes you wonder, this internet. But what can you do? I think the light hasn't gone red. That usually means I'm okay. Alrighty, cool. Now this mud thing, like I was saying earlier, being in glass is going to be the safest way to do it. Don't use a drinking glass, you know. Basically, whatever you use, just expect it to only fulfill that role now. So, unless you want to ruin a glass, like something to drink out of, I would highly advise against it. But this is only necessary, quote unquote, if you want to even do it on prints, right? I don't need to put mud on this guy. I just got to base coat it or primer it and then paint it. I don't need to do this whole process to it because it's not a layer print, right? It's a pewter model, pewter miniature. Model, miniature, I mean, I know there's technical, like, jargon there. One means one thing versus another, but what would you call that? I mean, it's a miniature, it's small, but it's also a model, right? I don't really know. I don't know what to properly identify that elemental as. So yeah, random thoughts that pop through your head when you had been mudding for a while on your miniatures model. This is a scale model, no doubt about it. And I can do this like edge portion right here. So when I get towards central mass, I'm going to leave it alone until I have it put together and put the pieces on that are supposed to be there. And then I can mud the rest of it to kind of bring it all in. Plus also do that seam line. That's going to take some work, as they say. Just want to get it nice and smooth. Nice thing about this stuff is that, like, I didn't clean this paintbrush right away. I cleaned it days after the last stream or when I used it. And all I did was just let it soak in some isopropyl alcohol. That 99%, although 70% will work just fine for these purposes. Kind of spun it against the container, the cup that it was in, and it broke down everything and it came off. It cleaned it off quite nicely for use again. Obviously, you don't want to do this with a nice brush because it is going to sacrifice the integrity of the brush a bit, but it's not a, you know, once and then throw the brush out situation at all. You can clean it and get plenty of life out of your dedicated mud brush. And then, you know, kind of think about the fact that you never thought you'd have such a thing. And just like that, in relatively short order, making good progress in all the mudding. There we go. This we can do up to around where the cockpit would go, so we can get in here on this guy where it's clearly gray a bit more. You don't even have to worry about like wiping excess off your brush or anything like that here because it's so thin, it's going to dry so fast, you can just spread it. And it's practically dry by the time I'm done spreading it. It's super, the acetone makes this dry super, super fast. It might not be a perfect dedicated coat, like you might have to do a couple on that, but it's going to dry super, super fast. And given how thin it is, you don't have to really worry about spreading it like you do a paint, because we also are going to sand it down, so we're not worried about it staying where it's at, if that makes any sense. I'll try carefully mudding up this piece just to make sure everything's good, but I feel like it's detail and stuff is going to be fine. I want to be careful, it is a little fragile. Something like this that's an antenna basically that I'm holding that you can't really see. If it were to break, it's a small enough piece that you could reprint, or you could get something like wire and drill it, glue it in there, and have it more or less work for you that way. But I try not to have it break. That's, if I can avoid it, I'll avoid it. So there's that. But hey, so it's good to know that you don't have to start from scratch again. As far as actual like videos on the channel, in regards to this project, they're gonna lag behind what you're seeing here. So a video that I will have going up soon is going to be much earlier in the process of working on it. I was having a bunch of technical issues and I finally sorted stuff out, so videos will be much easier to get to produce, and I'm able to get them to produce at a higher quality now. So you should start noticing that. and some of them already have been the product of that fixing, like the camo chassis showcase for the Kodiak and the Arctic Cheetah. Not a lot of actions going on there, but oh boy, is it have some quality now if you want to run it at certain levels on YouTube. But you get a look at that mech bay. So that's cool. And it'll be fun to do future videos in better detail with that. So that's why things have been lagging behind. We also had family over after the 4th of July. So when family's in town, I don't really do any streaming or making of videos or anything like that, because I just feel it wouldn't be right. So I've been lagging behind that way too, between technical issues and that. And just life, right? This is a hobby. Unless Catalyst Game Labs comes across this and is like, man, this random mediocre person is just who we want on our payroll, then hey, hit me up. But I don't know what I would bring to the table, aside from just enthusiasm. Oop. Also, I did just touch something that was wet. You don't have to worry about even fingerprints, because it doesn't really make fingerprints. But also, even if you messed up where it's kind of meant to go on, you can just quickly hit it again. And if it still isn't too good, a little bit of sanding will be just fine. This isn't paint after all. This is the process before doing your primer. Let's see how this guy's looking. Where else can I throw things down on the legs here? I was hesitant to put the legs fully together, but it just makes it easier to know what the parts are going where and then what all needs coverage. Plus, this is big enough where if I was really worried about doing something detail-wise, I could get to all aspects of the legs. So I just decided to go for it. Sometimes you just gotta do it a bit different from doing something the size of a Space Marine. Although, short of putting together the body, which I will, I wouldn't be putting together everything until the painting was done. So the body and cockpit will come together with the antenna piece and other stuff. The arms will stay separate and the bottom half will stay separate. Paint it up, put it together type of deal. I still like doing sub-assemblies like that. So, you know, everybody's different. That's just how I always enjoyed doing it. I like to paint as much as I can, even if I know you're really not going to see it. I just feel it's got continuity, if that makes any sense. That way. And it makes me feel better. So this leg is not going to stay posed like this. This is just how it's going to stand for now. Especially because it keeps falling over. Not because it can't pose itself, but because one leg's much looser than the other. And so it's prone to falling. Carefully paint up this antenna just for consistency's sake and any potential that it might have. Also to help me have an easier time telling if I got paint on it later on down the road. So we'll just carefully do that. Something small like this and delicate. The mud is more just there as an extra precaution. I'm not going to hit it with sanding paper or sanding film. It's just not enough there to sand without potentially damaging it. But yeah. So we'll let that take a breather. Once I do eventually paint it, I will be using Mr. Surfacer 1000 as the base primer coat. I'll mix that. I have Mr. Color Thinner, Mr. Thinner or whatever coming. I do have other thinners that could work with it, but I do try to keep things in-house that way for thinners, just as an extra precaution. So like I have these Gaia Notes paints, which are even pre-tariff stuff, was kind of a pain to get a hand on, the colors that I wanted, but I got pretty much what I need. And I have the thinner for it. And I could use that with Mr. Surfacer, no problem. I've been watching stuff about these paints where I know that can work, but I just rather have things together. Like I have Tamiya Colors thinner in case I need it for their stuff. With Tamiya, this is, what is this listed as? This is listed as acrylic. There's also enamel, I believe. You want to make sure, this is random, but you want to make sure that, where does it say it? So this, I don't know if you can see, it says acrylic paint on it. If I could get it to go into frame and focus, which I can't, because I'm bad at this. But this is an acrylic paint. This is the primer for it. All of my Tamiya paints are acrylic, but they're not water-based acrylic. They are flammable acrylics. So like your Citadel paints and Vallejo or Vallejo, and other companies are water-based acrylics, more or less. They're not exactly compatible with each other, like the Tamiya ones and that. They're not exactly like lacquer paints, but you definitely want to make sure you use the appropriate thinner from Tamiya that way, or just the appropriate thinner in general, because you can find the same color in both acrylic and like enamel or whatever from Tamiya, which can be problematic for sure. But yeah, there is that. And this is a surfacer paint, so it shouldn't really need much sanding after it's done. I'll take a look. I am going to use it also on the elemental, but Alrighty. Let's get back to the action. Right. Action, as they say. Oh man, that's getting pretty thin. Or pretty thin? That's the word I'm looking for. I don't know. Pretty... I mean, yeah, thin, but... Used up? Empty. Empty. Empty's the word I was looking for. Found it. Let's replenish a little bit. You just take it and you just squeeze it in there. That was a lot because it came out in one big swoop. And then this is old. This stuff is probably going on 4 years old, and it's still working, still doing what it's supposed to do, so that's always good. That was a good amount. It mixed in, so we're replenished a little bit. Kind of flakes off the brush there. Let's take a look at this antenna. Yeah, this detail's pretty good. I'm not worried about this size detail. Just make sure we can let this dry, and that's good to go for paint. It's off camera, but there it is. Let's carefully sand some stuff. Oops. So I don't know how else is going to come up. But as you can see, once I just gently put it across there, and you can see a difference in the way it looks. Basically, all the light spots are where I've sanded down. And if there's anything that's still dark, the sanding film hasn't touched it, so it's either in a recessed area, like in here, or it's not perfectly level, but that's pretty dang good. Feeling it. I do have better sanding stuff coming in, stuff that isn't worn out, so I'll be able to get to certain things better. But keep in mind, even if you don't get something perfectly sanded down, when the paint goes on, it's not like it's going to be a glaringly noticeable thing, because the difference isn't astronomical, right? Honestly, I feel like if you put paint on this, it would be smooth. So, and just if you want, just for showcasing, I can put it right back on. Makes it dark again. That's how you know you got the mud where you need it to be from where you were. And it's basically building up the area. And once it's fully dry, you can come back in and sand it. But I think we're going to be pretty good with that. There's more spots to sand on that, mind you. But that's all, since I just put mud on it again. I gotta let it dry fully. Here, I'm going to actually take this stick, which has got some thicker stuff going on it. To purposely kind of like gunk up this area to smooth it out. Kind of more like the actual Bondo would do. Because It's just, it was a little bit not what I was looking for. And that you want to let cure a good amount before doing anything with. Because if I put, like, I'm kind of reworking it now by getting it wet with the acetone and everything, which is fine. But once it's fully dry, we can make sure it's not coming out anywhere, like sticking out excessively. Basically just reshape that a little bit, get it smooth on the backside. Which wasn't 100% necessary, but I just wanted to do it as a showcase, and also I feel better. So I did it, and we're good. So there's that. Boom. We can let that dry. So we want to mix this by hand, but the paints, I don't have a Tamiya mixer, but I have a Badger airbrush mixer. It's battery powered, it'll spin, and that's what you want to mix up your Mr. Surfacer with. And pretty much any paint really, but Mr. Surfacer and these Guy Nose paints and even Tamiya's need a bit more than just a handshake, where you not literally a handshake, but where you shake up a paint pot. Need a little bit more agitation, I suppose, is the word. I don't know if that's true or not, if that's the word, but sure sounded fancy. We'll go in and touch up some more mud, because we're never actually going to paint this thing. We're just going to mud it, apparently. It's getting there. Though, truth be told, I do like to try to get everything at the painting stage. That way I don't have to go back to the mudding stage. So that basically means getting this body partially built, all the stuff printed that I need, and then mud it up. So there's that to keep in mind. I'll slide this way. I'll take the sanding film, move this guy over here, sand over the paper plate to help a little bit with cleanup. And it's just a gentle. Technically, this type of grit, whatever this is, I don't remember the grit color code, would be more of a wet sanding, but we don't need to get that crazy with it here. I mean, you could. I got a little water. I could do that and put it down, get it wet, but it's not really doing anything extra for me, because we're not doing that type of sanding. We're not doing finish sanding, you know what I mean? For like full-on finish sanding, a little bit of wetness can go a long way. Like if you're doing a car or paint sanding. This is just a glorified filler situation. So being wet isn't a prerequisite, if that makes any sense. It's not, you're not doing it wrong, just taking the sanding film to it, because we're not really doing that type of sanding, like I said. But that's nice and smooth. It's interesting, the more detail to a point, the smoother the print, I've noticed, at least for how I print. And this is happening to be pretty smooth too. You can see it's pretty uniform in the sanding there. The more uniform it looks when you're done sanding, the smoother your surface is. And this feels really good. So, depending upon the surface, and just the print, I guess, I don't know. Some surfaces just need more than others. It could be the file, luck, I don't know. But This is feeling pretty good. I like that. Shouldn't need too much here in terms of sanding or mudding past what I just did to really be ready for paint, which is always good news. That means I can focus more so on getting the pieces together, getting the parts on it, mudding those parts up, and then making the seam, in this case, the two halves will be properly put together, and then getting that seam filled in. That seam might require some near pure Bondo spot putty in very small amounts worked into the seam and then sanded down smooth, maybe taking some of the wet mud and putting it over that as like a thinner binder thing to kind of smooth it in and then sand it. But that would be the only seam that I'd be worried about doing that with, just given the way it is printed in two halves. So that's good. That's really good. I don't want to have to worry too much about filling up seams and gaps like that. Everything else works out pretty well. A bit more sanded. And if this was the final sanding for all these parts to get ready for paint, the one thing I might do is come in with a super lightly damped paper towel, as if it wasn't very nearly dry, right? Super, super hard, like one drop of water, and then dry it a little bit, and just come in and wipe these things down to get any. If you have canned air, spray them down just to get any particular sanding detritus off of the model before painting, to make our lives easier, or my life easier. And if you were doing it, your lives easier. So yeah, our lives easier, I guess, works. If you are still, if you have tuned into this after the fact and you are still watching, you've seen a good most of this mechs and pieces. What's your guess? Nobody's properly guessed the mech yet, so that's why I haven't announced what it is. But once it's properly been guessed, a correct guess, or we get to the point where there's just no point in keeping it a secret anymore, I'll reveal. What I will say is I do have, in 6mm form, this mech and every mech in this star. And while working on this chassis and then the other 4 chassis for the star in the future, once we finish this one, move on to the next, once the mech is guessed, then I'll bring in the 6mm model and work on it as well. And I think what I'm going to do is paint it using the same paints. I don't think I'm going to use just like my Citadel acrylics or whatnot of similar colors. I think I'm going to use the same paints just to do something a bit different. So there's that. Only they won't need the mud because, well, they're actual models from Catalyst Game Labs, or official products, and not this thing. But just so you know, the sooner we get a guess that's correct, the sooner we can see that in the next C3 stream. Which is what I'm going to call anything I do workbench-wise. I'm going to call it just a C3 stream. It's a chill, chat, and create. Doesn't have to be battle mechs. Yes, Omni mechs or battle mechs. It doesn't have to be battle tech. It can be 40K. Whatever model I'm working on at the time. I don't have any Gunpla to work on. I haven't worked on Gunpla in years. The only ones I have done is a Tall Geese 1 that I converted from a Tall Geese 2/3 kit. And then a Zaku that's missing some pieces after a Char Zaku specifically. Missing some pieces from all the moving. But, fun stuff to do. I just haven't really been committed to doing that stuff. Robotech, yes, Robotech, had a crowd-funded miniature game that I think is belly up. I don't know if it's still in existence. And I forgot the name of it. I just had it off the tip of my tongue. But I have a bunch of that I haven't put together yet. Or painted yet, I should say, that I might also work on maybe later on at some point. So plenty of stuff to work on in a C3 stream. As well as potentially just chatting, right? If anybody shows up. You don't have to. I don't have to actively be working on something crazy. I can take a back seat to this showcasing and chatting. That's why it's chill, chat, create, any combination thereof. Sanding's going pretty well though. Given that this sanding film is pretty used up. It'll be nice to eventually get the new pieces. Get into the little recesses and everything else. Just get it really going well. And you don't have to sand 100% of what I put down, right? As long as everything feels good to the touch, it's gonna work pretty well for the paint. It's just making sure anything that seems a little odd gets sanded and make sure it's just good. Any excess, too much mud gets sanded off. Like that's nice and smooth. And that part's good, you know. It's kind of like a final QC check for smoothness for paint. And it's coming together quite nicely. Even if it doesn't want to stand up because that one ankle joint is really loose on that one leg. All right. It's bad that I don't remember which arm I did the extra layer on and the raw, not raw, but really thick application. You think I remember that, but also at the same time, it means it's coming together pretty good if I can't quite remember which one I did it on based on the sanding. That feels really good too. It doesn't look perfect, but a little bit of surfacer on there. Some paint, and it's going to be nice and smooth. And that's what we like to see. By we, I mean me, and hopefully you too. If you're doing models. A little bit of just... I really wonder what's happening. Hey, we reconnected again. Look at me go. Ooh, let me see here. You think you got something working and something internet or technology wise just rears up to bite you. I said this in the prior, or in the test stream, kind of the first C3 stream. But you don't want to be huffing this stuff in. Now I can't smell it, not because I can't smell, but because I'm in a really small confined space. And I have adequate airflow around me. The AC's on. Better be. I had to get it fully replaced. So, you know, I have airflow. I'm not nosed apart. and I'm not really working with extreme amounts of this stuff. But if you are noticing a smell, because this stuff isn't odorless, then I definitely recommend a mask. Even if you're doing what I'm doing and you're not airbrushing or whatever. Better safe than sorry. This stuff is not, it's not vitamins and minerals to breathe in, so just food for thought. But yeah, I'm really pleased with the progress made with the mud here. It's looking pretty good. So this is what, where is it? No, that's not the part. Where are you? This is what one of those things kind of looks like before you clip it up and get ready to go into the body. It's not really something I like cutting on this cutting mat. Funnily enough, I have a cutting mat that I like to use specifically for this stuff because it's older. So there it is. And I'm not going to see what I'm doing too well, but it's pretty straightforward. You have the part and you want it to be missing all this print flash, more or less. Now it's not flash, I forget what exactly it's called. It's not something you'd always have. There's two different ways to print some files. One of the ways has this little like footprint go around the piece. I forget what it's called. The other way has a ring that goes around it and it's not touching it. I follow the file's recommendations for settings and it wants it this way. So I'm off screen, obviously pulling things apart, but as you can see, it's already getting much better for use. So that's cool. And let's see. Just want to get it cleaned up so it can fit inside. Like, you're not going to see this ever, so I don't need to make it perfect. I just got to make it so it fits snugly in both sides. It's not going to single-handedly hold the parts together. I mean, technically, if they fit in snugly enough, you could just friction fit everything together and not glue it. I'm going to glue these in, and then I'm going to, you know, glue each root. I'll call these the root. So you glue the one half that goes in. Once it's in everything here, then I'll apply glue around here and slap it together. It's the tight fit, I know that much from everything else and from dry fitting one of the pieces I have already properly cut out. So I'm not going to just slap it together to see partially way through. Once it's ready to go, I'm going to just slap them together with glue and call it good. So you do want to get it pretty well cut out, because the idea of it is it's meant to flex down a little bit and basically use interference as a way to friction fit, more or less, with interference. Now, I'm not just cutting pieces off and throwing them randomly. I have a garbage tray, more or less, like an old paper plate I was using for stuff that's just too dirty to use. And then like with paint and stuff on it. So I use that just to collect the cut-offs that I'm doing and whatnot, and then I'll throw that out at the end. This plate will eventually go to that same fate. I kind of rotate them out. Just makes things easier. Might not do the Space Marine this evening. Might save that for a future C3 stream. Just cause. Is there, should the whim take me, but I feel like that's... I want to have a decent chunk of time, and I'm winding things down now to do all the orange on that body. Basically get it so I can put the backpack, which is done and ready to go, on the model. Where are you at? If I had to do it the other way. There it is. One thing I found is orange is hard to show on camera, but in person, trust me, it's orange, and orange is my favorite color, and for literal years I've been really picky about trying to do an orange. But if you're curious, contrast, what is that called? Magma Droth Flame. Again, doesn't look orange on the camera. This is the orange that I was going for. There's another orange that didn't look quite as good for me, but that one mixed in with contrast medium, 3 parts contrast medium, and 1 part of that orange, put on like a glaze instead of it working like a contrast, and I'm happy with it. I got the idea for that from seeing somebody else do that with yellow, which really looks good on yellow, and I would do if I was gonna. I do have a Lamenter I want to paint up at some point, or repaint it up, whatever, but I have to redo it because it was a firstborn. Well, in any case, the point is, I would do it with the same concept, but with the yellow contrast paint, with the contrast medium, 3:1 contrast medium to paint. Because once I do the orange, I want to get the rest of this guy's body done. Put the orange, then do the detail. Get the then do the detail pieces, namely the eyes, which will be purple eye lenses. Everything else is done. Glue the backpack on, and then I want to work on the arms, and then the base. Speaking of bases, which I have a lot of fun working on, I feel like this mech should be on a base when I'm done. The Timberwolf is on a base. I can't use the same base though, because that base was specifically made as a file to hold that Timberwolf's feet in place, a little bit extra security. It's not glued to that base, but it can't slide. This doesn't have the same footprint. I was going to say foot outline, but literally the word is footprint. So I don't know if I want to try and go to something like a Hobby Lobby or Michael's to get like a hex piece of wood, like a small, like not a small, but an appropriate sized piece of hex here. So this thing can sit on it like it's a big mech, right? Because you can see this is a hex base. So have it sit on like a really big hex and then do a base like it's a really big miniature. Because I also kind of want to do a diorama display for these guys. And if I do that, I'm wondering if I should do the bases in such a way with that display that they kind of lock into the display, so like it sits flush and is part of the display, and then I have to figure out how to do the bases. I just feel like this standing on its own without a base just doesn't feel complete, even though it's a gigantic model. But that's just me. Share your thoughts if you're watching this at all in the future. What do you think I should do? So, but yeah, I've been meaning to. I just never done it yet, which is why I'm thinking if I just make next weekend a weekend off of doing like adulting stuff outside of basic errands like groceries and lawn care and cleaning, I can maybe take the motorcycle out for a ride, get it moving again, maybe to one of those stores, and or just go there either way and see if they have wooden hex pieces to use as a base. I'll measure what the Timberwolf is on. Okay, I think that's a good size, more or less, of like a hex. And then maybe pick one up as a test and see about that. And then go from there. It's just an idea, though. While I am there, however, what I will be doing is picking up some oil paints, probably burnt umber, and definitely a black, and probably burnt umber. And if they have like a grayish, maybe. But I have this these mineral spirits, also known as white spirits. It's not opened yet. This works really well with enamel stuff. Like I have some AK interactive enamel like effects, and here we go. Like a cursed earth, or engine oil. Now, this stuff is really old, and I think it's kind of turned, like where it's not really working or even mixing very well anymore. But that, I feel, works well. Well, not I feel, it does work well with white spirits or mineral spirits. But so does oil paint in general, because that's enamel stuff. But oil paints also work well with that. I actually have some ammo. Ammo Meg oil brushers. Starship Filth and Black. These have a fine tip brush in there. It reminds you of almost like, I don't know, eyeliner? I don't know, not eyeliner. It's not that type of brush. Basically, you unscrew it, you dip it in, you paint on to like do weathering effects, right? To grime it up or whatever. But while that is cool, it's not ideal for what I want to do, which is to, once the piece is fully painted up, seal it in a gloss varnish, then take thin down oil paint, wash it all over everything, let it set for a bit, and then take that mineral spirit and wipe off most of it. It's a tried and true method for doing like scale model stuff, costuming stuff, weathering effects that way, for props and for scale models. And it's, the nice thing about it is you're just wiping it off of anywhere that isn't like a panel line. This is a way of doing panel line stuff without necessarily utilizing the panel line accent color stuff. This stuff is really great, and I will be using that too before sealing it in. And then but the other stuff, what's nice about the wash of oil paint is that if it's not a clearly defined panel line, it's the panel liner thing, the panel line paint stuff from like Tamiya and other companies don't work that well on it because it needs to be a clearly defined panel line, which we'll come back to that. So like on this leg, you have like a panel line going through the middle here. If I could get it on camera, of that little oval piece. It's kind of hard to see now because whatever. But like these recesses here don't take panel lining very well, but they take washes very well. And around this oval part isn't a panel line, but could definitely be picked out with like a wash kind of gathering along its where it meets the flat surface. And if you do that with an oil wash, let it kind of dry on there for a bit and then carefully wipe off, like take a moistened Q-tip or something bigger for the size of this, and then go over the parts, just over the raised surfaces to get it where you want it. You get a really nice effect. I don't want these guys to be too weathered up, but at the same time I do want some definition. And outside of panel lining, that oil wash is going to be a good way to do that. So I'm just trimming off more pieces, more of these things that go into the body because, well, working on the body, right? So I might as well get the stuff ready to go to put them together. And, you know, if I was smarter or more better prepared, I would have done this before the stream started. But I didn't. I was doing other stuff. So There's a total of 2, 4, 6, 7 of them. And you can even see in here, I'll come back and clean up these holes. So they do have a little bit of like, you call it flash if it wasn't 3D print, but a little bit of stuff, filament in the way. So we're going to get it nice and clean on both halves. So when we do put the pieces in, there's no resistance, and we can get it to kind of clamshell click together as tight as possible. Which means I'll probably also take this to a flat surface like this with some sandpaper, a little bit coarser maybe, or not so much coarser, maybe one of these, something like this. So I'm getting a new set in, and just kind of rub it to get it smooth and flat. Make sure there just isn't any raised sections. So when they do come together, they come together flat and flush. And then you come back in and clean up the holes. Because I'm not trying to connect them now, I can afford to wait for the cleaner, fresher pieces and do this again. And just make sure it's as smooth as can be, because we really want these to sit flush with one another when they're done. And then, oh, there we go. When they're done, we want it to sit flush as best we can, which when you have these pieces in there, it'll do that. And then put the other parts on and go to town and making it look really good with the mud and whatnot. Let me take this stick out because I don't think I'm mudding up anything. I think we're going to wind down here. As I nearly knock over the very thing I didn't want to knock over, but I didn't. That's why I said nearly. Cover this up. Even if this gets too caked up or gunked up in there, I can put a little bit of that acetone or whatever else, shake it up, spin it around, it'll clean it out. So if you're worried about it getting too gunky, don't worry about that. But as far as gluing stuff together goes, like I glued in the gun to this arm and the hand to this arm. The glue I use for this project that I'm probably going to use for more stuff is what is used to make kind of like sprue glue, I think, and this Tamiya cement. The Tamiya cement does a really good job in gluing. You just got a brush in there, a brush applicator, a good amount. You just put it on where you want it to go. It's not as hot, so it's not going to necessarily melt things like the instant it touches it, nor does it flash off as fast as some of the crazy glues out there, super glues out there, where the moment it touches the part, it sticks to it. You have some work time, which I prefer, to get it right where you want it. And then it'll set up and do everything quite nice. But that's what I have been gluing everything together with, from that classic Timberwolf model that I showed on the channel to this stuff. And I'll probably be using it also for even like Astartes and whatnot, like the Space Marine model. I have plastic glue and it works fine. Half the time I can't find it because I never remember where I put it. So there's that. And then the other times, you know, it can be a little fiddly getting it to come out at times, but plastic glue works just fine on those things. But this right here just has good work time. I just really like it. So I'll probably use that because I also know where it is and I have a bunch of it. But yeah, now the process is just seeing what, after sanding, needs another coat. And do that, rinse and repeat until I am happy with it. Like right here, I don't know if you can see it. In here, it's hard to get it to come in. In any case, that I probably want to do another coat. How can I? But even so, it's not the most horrible thing in the world. Another little coat here. And I think I'll have myself a... Like, this feels the most egregious. So I can actually take it, you know, of what I've been feeling. So I can actually probably take some of this that's a little bit clumpy, goopy, thin it down just to the point of where it's like no longer gonna be this like a pancake batter, but like thinner than that, like thin, like the more of a thicker than where it's optimal, but not too thick. How's that for a nondescript? And apply it here and work it in, and it should be good. This side, a little bit of the same deal in the same spot. But all in all, though, really pleased. And again, even if you just put paint down and everything, you probably wouldn't notice it. So it's not something to worry about. Now, I'm not going, I guess I've been jumping around here. The gloss varnish isn't the final finish that I'm going for. If you're going to do the oil wash with the mineral spirit trick, you need it to be sealed or else it's going to mess with the paint underneath it. A gloss varnish protects that stuff. And the gloss just is easier to work with to clean up. And then after you do that, you can then hit it again with a satin or a matte varnish, and it'll be fine. So there's that. But yeah, that's about it. I'm not sure what I want to do for base colors. The goal is Alpha Galaxy of Smoke Jaguar, and I'm just trying to figure out what type of light gray to do. I have some other colors. That's obviously not going to work. It's too blue. But just some thoughts. I don't know exactly what the color palette or the color recipe is going to be just yet, but I do have the paints for it. I will be utilizing like a... Well, this German gray might be a good base. I don't know, for something. I might mix a little bit of German gray with this black, with this flat black, for the rosette spots, or rosettes. But yeah, so I got colors to work with. But we'll see. Not at that step yet, but we're getting closer and closer every time. More and more mech to be seen. I'll eventually do an update video. And in the update videos, I'll be mentioning the C3 stream. So if you're catching this after the fact, stay on the lookout. Typically, it's going to be done during the weekend, typically on Sunday evenings. Might hit it up on like a Thursday randomly. Monday tends to be, for now, I guess I should say, when I am... My stream schedule isn't set in stone, but for now, what I will be focusing on streaming is Mercenary Mondays, Warrior Cast Wednesdays, and then I do something, if I stream it, is For the Emperor Friday with Space Marine 2. I still have to finish Battletech 2018, so I'll work that in somewhere as well. But until I get Mercenaries up to the point where I'm ready for Shadow Kerensky on a save file, that's kind of the priority, outside of doing some New Game Plus for Warrior Cast Wednesday. Once I finish the Smoke Jaguar New Game Plus, maybe I'll take a Mech Warrior break and only do Mercenaries, and then finish off Battletech 2018, because I've been having fun with that and I haven't touched it in a while. So, some random insight for you. I'll be going over this in future videos too. And real quick, this leg here, smooth feeling to the touch. This feels a little coarse because I haven't sanded it yet. A little bit of sanding. Nothing crazy, and just as smooth to the touch. So that's why we sand. It knocks off the coarseness of the dried Bondo spot putty stuff, and it makes it nice and smooth. So the putting it down fills things in, so you don't have you don't have the striations, and then from there you just gently sand it down to make it smooth to the touch, and we're golden. So, with that said, that's all I got for you on this one. Gonna wrap things up. Gotta get ready for work. Definitely, if you click on this later, leave a comment, give it a like, consider alpha striking that subscribe button. We have an algorithm, we have the combat. So I definitely appreciate that. And until the next one, take care.